Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from In Sulphur entitled Dark Secrets of the Soul. This is the sophomore studio album from this Italian blackened deathcore crew, and I know exactly what you're thinking right now, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. You're sitting there in your little chair with your little arms crossed and your little eyes are rolling and your little head going, ugh, yet another band ripping off Lorna Shore. Yet another band fusing the most generic elements of deathcore with the most bombastic elements of black metal into something trendy and dumb and obnoxious and overproduced. And look, I get it. I really, truly, honestly fucking do. In a post to the Hellfire Pain Remains world, in a post Lorna Shore blows the absolute fuck up world, it really does feel as if deathcore is like hyper fixated on this kind of like fusion of black metal and deathcore. But I want to highlight this album for a few reasons. The first of which being that blackened deathcore isn't really going anywhere. It is an established part of deathcore and modern metal at this point. There's nothing to gain from avoiding it. It's here to stay for at least a little bit. Let's just get the fuck over it. And two, because I actually think this is one of the more interesting and, dare I say, even unique kind of contributions to blackened deathcore that I have seen in some time. It definitely has a lot of the usual elements and ingredients as your standard blackened deathcore release, but whereas your standard blackened deathcore release usually just piles black metal elements on top of a mostly straightforward meat and potatoes kind of brutal death metal record, In Sulphur kind of do it the other way around. Instead, they're pulling a lot of influence from atmospheric, melodic, vampiric symphonic black metal and kind of putting a few deathcore influences into that. It does have a slew of sounds that I would associate with Carnifex, Whitechapel, the aforementioned Lorna Shore, but also I feel like this thing genuinely feels more in line with something from Dimmu Borgir, or Cradle of Filth, or Behemoth, or Septic Flesh. It is a very lavish, theatrical, and dynamic record, and it does a good job at embedding more introspective lyrical themes and concepts within, like, dark, high fantasy stories and landscapes. Is it a perfect record? Absolutely not. In fact, somewhat ironically, it suffers from some of the same issues that a lot of blackened deathcore albums suffer from, including, super ironically, Pain Remains from Lorna Shore. But for the most part, it does work. And I think if you're on the verge of, like, just completely disregarding blackened deathcore altogether, this might be something that could engage you just enough and entertain you just enough to hang on for just a bit longer. You've got Eclipse by the Son of Eden, which despite its orchestral components and attributes is a relatively straightforward and pummeling piece of, like, blackened death metal. Tons of chunky, meaty, snappy grooves here, monstrous vocal onslaughts, doomy undertones, it's grim, it's sinister, it's apocalyptic. I listen to this song and I have an image in my mind of, like, purplish red skies with, like, raining blood and demon creatures in every which direction, like a scene out of Castlevania. Then there's Ruined by Snow and Hail, which does a really good job at combining this very over-the-top kind of late 90s, early 2000s symphonic black metal kind of shit with some destructive fucking riffs and grooves that honestly wouldn't be out of place on a Meshuggah record. The song's action-packed climax, I would say, is a highlight on the album. It is filled with dueling strings and fiery guitar pyrotechnics, and despite that, it doesn't really feel that overwhelming or overstimulating. Not to be outdone, the album's closing number, Shadow of the Dark Throne, is filled with tons of nasty and gnarly metal nuggets for you to chew on. An incredibly versatile and cinematic number, a great way to close out this record. The string work, the venomous, multi-layered guttural vocal assaults, the insane percussion, it's all there. It kind of feels like something that maybe Shadow of Intent would put together. At times, it matches the intensity and the extremity of something I would also expect from Cattle Decapitation, although here, obviously, with a much more symphonic black metal kind of coat of paint. That said, my favorite track here might be the title track, Dark Secrets of the Soul, as it does a really great job at creating something really moving and really urgent out of some really simplistic rolling grooves and some really clean, cold synth work. Lots of mid to late 90s black metal spice and influence here. That's cool, that's great, gives this thing a nice, cold, consuming aura. The slower grooves and mirages combined with the more subtle and somber melodies is a nice touch as well. Right before that, though, I like that it kind of has this, like, Lamb of God-esque piss and vinegar kind of thing going on. Like, it's just really, like, nasty and in your face for a hot minute. Now, unfortunately, as I said before, this is not a perfect record. There are at least a couple of duds within the track list. Say My Name, for instance, I found to be somewhat aimless. I'm not a huge fan of the clean vocals in Lotus either. There are some instrumental intro and interlude cuts here that are very poorly implemented and, frankly, just very poorly written. Like, Vampire Communion sounds like every acoustic interlude you've heard on any kind of, like, dark metal record in the history of mankind, and it doesn't even flow that well into Shadow of the Dark Throne. And the intro cut, Advenient Regum Tum, I mean, this is just flat out fucking ugly and garish and awful in my opinion. It's literally a collection of poorly mixed, incomprehensible sounds and samples kind of sandwiched together in this really awkward and clumsy way. It creates absolutely no tension or atmosphere whatsoever and is overall just a horrible way to officially open this record. In general, across the board, I feel like there's a little bit of excess fat and gristle on each of these cuts, like you could trim 30 seconds, maybe even a minute off and lose none of that delicious meat and protein. And frankly, just like with a lot of other blackened deathcore albums out there wasn't really a single breakdown that I found was interesting or necessary. Considering that Drown in Sulphur draw much more influence from black metal than your standard blackened deathcore crew, I can't help but wonder, why did they even bother? Overall, I'm feeling a 3 out of 5, but I want to stress that this is a very enthusiastic 3 out of 5. Like, I still think, warts and all, there's a lot of really cool stuff on this record. And I still think, warts and all, this is one of the more interesting blackened deathcore albums out there right now. In the future, I would recommend to Drown in Sulphur lean even further into the black metal influences, lean even further into atmospheric black metal, melodic black metal, symphonic black metal, blackened death metal, screw deathcore all together. Because frankly, it was the black metal elements of this record consistently across the board that were the most interesting and that were the best executed. I'm looking forward to seeing how people respond to this, and I'm also looking forward to seeing how Drown in Sulphur continue to evolve and refine their sound from here on. 3 out of 5, a very enthusiastic one at that. Check this out if you get the chance. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Press the subscribe button if you somehow haven't done so already, so you can get updates immediately. Look, there's even more videos here. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.